Hello everybody, and welcome once again to Caleb Likes Books. I am Caleb, and today we are going to be taking a look at a book that I recently finished, actually yesterday as of recording this, but this video will be going up a bit later. And that is The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. The particular version of it that I read is the Arcturus Classics paperback. I really like their editions, they're very nice. I really like the cover art, and they're usually pretty cheap. I got this one for like $5 or $6 at Books A Million. So if you are interested in this particular version, that is what it is. And first of all, I want to preface this review by saying that I am not particularly well versed in either sci-fi fiction or classic sci-fi, especially. I have read some sci-fi before, primarily when it comes to the Star Wars tie-in novels, but I've read a couple of other sci-fi books, and I suppose you could also classify some like H.P. Lovecraft stories as classic horror sci-fi, and I really enjoy his work. But other than that, this is basically the first classic sci-fi novel that I have read. So do keep that in mind. And I will be spoiling some aspects of this book. For me specifically, the spoilers for me wouldn't have really mattered that much. But if you don't want any spoilers whatsoever, it's not going to be anything crazy. I mean, it's going to be kind of going into generally how things go in this book, and I will be talking about the ending at one point. I'm not going to go into specifics like what specifically happens in the ending, but kind of the overall feel of it, because it is something that I want to talk about. So if you are sensitive to those kinds of spoilers, I don't think it would really affect your enjoyment of this book at all, but if you think it would, then you may want to be aware of that. So first, I'm going to talk about some positives with this book. First of all, I would actually say one thing that I liked about it was the length. It's one that you can read really quickly. I got through it in a few days, with a handful of pretty short sittings, so it didn't really take me that long to get through. So I guess that's one plus. And I think the premise of this book is quite interesting. I was actually first interested in reading it because I saw the film adaptation with Tom Cruise as the lead actor. I believe it came out in like 2005 or something like that, if I remember correctly. So I became interested in it during that because I really liked the premise of it and the overall kind of idea of it, and I really enjoyed the movie, actually. So I figured I'd read the book. And the premise of, these aliens, most likely from Mars, I believe the book says they are from Mars, coming to Earth and basically destroying everything for whatever reason they may have for doing that. I find very interesting. It's a very simple premise. It's kind of your typical alien invasion sort of setup, but I think it was really well done, and I like the idea of it in general. And I think the way that the invasion was written also was really well done. You really get a sense of kind of the panic and the horrifyingness, I guess. That's probably not a word, but you get the general feel of what it's like for this to happen within the book. It comes across very, very well. And I also enjoyed the descriptions of the Martians, both in terms of what their technology is like. They have these big tripod walker thingies that they come in that I enjoyed reading about. Plus, there are some points where the narrator, whose name I can't remember, I don't even remember if he's given a name, but the narrator observes the aliens themselves outside of the walkers, and kind of seeing what they're doing and the description of them I thought was really cool. The main thing about this book that I really enjoyed was actually the second part of it. This book is split up into two separate books. The first being The Coming of the Martians, in which the aliens come to Earth and start invading and destroy everything and all that stuff. And there's The Earth Under the Martians, which is kind of a little bit of the aftermath, how the narrator and some other individuals are handling the invasion and kind of the aftermath of the initial attack. I thought the second part, The Earth Under the Martians, was fantastically done. It was really a page turner, I think. I just kept wanting to read it because I found that the most interesting part of the book, kind of seeing how the narrator and other characters were mentally handling it, and kind of there's even some hints of potential insanity with certain events that happen during that, where it's like, you can really see what these sorts of events would do to somebody, having your home planet come to by these aliens from outer space and completely destroyed, and being powerless to resist them and all that kind of thing. I think that was handled really well, just kind of the character's response to that. And another quick thing, probably my last positive point that I'll touch on in this review that I want to bring up, is actually the writing style. I've found, for me at least, a lot of the time within the classics, the writing style is partially what loses me a little bit. Not that I don't enjoy some classics. There are some I've read. I've mentioned, for example, H.P. Lovecraft, whose work I really like, as well as just the way things are put on the page sometimes can maybe in certain books be a little dry, or not super engaging, or just kind of the words and the prose that is used just being kind of difficult to really read, I guess. And I didn't really think that was the case with this book. Going back to H.P. Lovecraft, who, again, I really like, his prose sometimes, for me, is very difficult to get through, even though I really enjoy his stories. That was not really the case for this one, even though this book came out a couple of decades before Lovecraft was writing. So the writing style, I think, for a classic especially, is quite accessible. So if that is something that you struggle with, like myself, when it comes to reading classics, I think that you will be able to get through this book a lot easier than maybe some others. However, I do have a handful of negatives for this as well. I think the biggest one being that earlier I mentioned I really enjoyed the second book of this book, the second part, the Earth Under the Martians. I was not really as much into The Coming of the Martians, the first book, which takes up like the first 2/3 of the book. Of course, there were parts of it that I enjoyed. As I mentioned earlier, I liked the descriptions of the aliens and kind of what they were doing, what they looked like, the kind of general feel of the story and everything. But it was not super engaging to me until we hit the Earth Under the Martians section. So a good 2/3 of this book just didn't quite grab me. Another thing is the characters. I didn't necessarily not enjoy the characters in this, but I wouldn't say I really was that interested in them. I really enjoy characters in books. I enjoy a good plot as well, which I think is where this book, both in terms of the plot and the general kind of atmosphere of it, I guess, is where it more shines, whereas the characters, I think, were pretty weak. And as someone who I would consider more of a character reader, that did not really work for me in this book. And the final negative point I have is about the ending. So if you don't want to know anything about how this ends, even though I feel like it's fairly obvious, you may not want to watch this part of the video. I was not crazy about the ending of this book, which pretty much almost all of the book up until that point is very bleak. It's very like, oh no, they're attacking us, they're killing everyone, they're destroying everything, this is horrible. There are some more hopeful moments in the book. For example, there's one point in the book where the narrator talks to someone and they're talking about how they're gonna continue to survive and humanity is gonna continue on even with all this horrible stuff that happened. And I liked that. I thought that was really well done. But the ending itself is extremely like uplifting and happy. I guess as happy as it can be with a story where Earth is largely destroyed, but it felt really off to me. It felt really jarring compared to the rest of the book. Not that I would have been opposed to a happier ending for something like this. I think it makes sense that for a story like this, you would want to have a happy ending of, okay, everything is going to be fine or whatever. But I just think it was maybe a little, first of all, too jarring. The ending, I think, came very suddenly, which I didn't like, and I think it was maybe, for me at least, a little too uplifting. It didn't, I would have liked it a little more if it was maybe felt a bit more bittersweet, and maybe it does to some people, but to me it just really didn't. So that's kind of my other negative. So overall, I would say I did enjoy this book a decent amount. As I said, there was a significant portion of it that I was not super into, but I did really enjoy the last third or so of the book. And I'm very glad to have read it because it's a very important book for sci-fi and literature in general, I guess. So I'm glad to have read it. And it was generally, I think, a positive experience. If I were to give it like a rating out of 10, it'd probably be somewhere like in the 7 out of 10 range. Let me know in the comments if you have read this book or if you plan to read it or whatever. And let me know what you thought of it if you have read it. And that's pretty much all I got for you today. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.